Hello, my name is Reverend Dr. May Elise Cannon. Today is Thursday, December 5th. It's day 426. I apologize about my voice. I've been quite sick and now have laryngitis. And this is a weekly summary, so we'll make sure that you can follow along in terms of the subtitles, but a weekly summary of the news of the past week. So 426 days. Pray for us in terms of our work, pray for our staff that are traveling all over the country, often in and out of the Middle East. Pray for those who are speaking to churches this Advent season. Pray for our Advent Not Arms campaign. We'll have a bishop's letter coming out soon. Pray that leaders would be courageous in using their power and voices as influence for good. The main summary of news for today, Thursday, December 5th, is that Israeli Security Cabinet is talking about the possibility of ceasefire in Gaza. Qatar is now re-engaging in ceasefire negotiations. That's what the Trump team wants. They have been ousted in large part by the Biden administration. Egypt is hoping to play a key role. So now you have Qatar talks and Egypt talks, and they're not yet working together. So that's one of the dynamics that we're seeing. Trump's Middle East envoy, Steve Witkoff, held meetings in Qatar with Israel, while Israel is sending leaders to meet with Hamas delegates and Egyptian leaders in Cairo. So all that's happened in the last couple of days. The Israeli Defense Forces have said that there was an attack in Gaza on the Al-Mawasi refugee area. That was on Wednesday. Yesterday, it killed at least 20 people. They said it was targeting Hamas militants. Other significant news, I'll talk more about this tomorrow. Hopefully I'll have my voice then. Amnesty International accused Israel of committing genocide in Gaza. A major report just came out about that, which I encourage you to take a look at. I'm going to try to summarize the news quickly because I'm sure it's hard to understand what I'm saying. You can find more details about this in the daily updates. So, the Egypt deal has had a fair amount of optimism that there could be progress. In Egypt, Fatah, the political party of the Palestinian Authority, and Hamas have said that they would put together a committee that would be a bureaucratic committee. It would not be made of political actors, but that committee would act as the political body that would run Gaza after a ceasefire agreement. That's been considered a breakthrough. Another conversation this past week has been about the possibility of reopening the Rafah border. That would be huge. That would allow sick Palestinians from Gaza to be able to go in and out. One of the big concerns is that if people are allowed to leave, they might never be allowed to return. So Rafah also has been historically a major crossing to allow in humanitarian assistance. So we hope that we'll see movement in that direction in coming days. We hope also that Mahmoud Abbas, the president of the Palestinian Authority, will publicly announce the ordering of the establishment of this committee. In addition, and this contradicts, that whole plan of the Palestinians, the Israelis have said that the IDF, this was Smotrich, the finance minister, he has said that the Israeli Defense Forces in Israel plan on staying in Gaza for a long time. And there's been a debate within the Israeli government about how much it would cost to maintain military control, physical occupation by the military. Smotrich said it would cost $25 million. Smotrich said it would cost a few $100 million, and the military said it would cost $25 billion. $25 billion is what the military said, and Smotrich said a few hundred million. A Hamas official this past week blamed Israel for the lack of a ceasefire and the hostage release agreement. Of course, this blaming has gone back and forth for months. In addition to the Cairo efforts, we know that Trump's team is actively at work. I mentioned Steve Witkoff and the meetings he's been having. I'm like, late November. What month is it? It's December. In late November, he went to Qatar. He's been having meetings with Qataris and Israelis. He has met with Prime Minister Netanyahu. He met with the Prime Minister, Minister Mohammed bin Abdulrahman Al Thani of Qatar. So we know that Trump's team is actively at work. Trump has said the hostages must be released by January 20th. Many people think that that timeline, without a comprehensive permanent ceasefire or without some type of ceasefire agreement related to Gaza in place, that timeline's unrealistic. All the while, people every day continue to die in Gaza, the vast majority of which are dying by direct military attacks. On Wednesday, Israeli tanks went further into South Gaza. Palestinian medics said airstrikes killed 20 people in the South Gaza Strip. Between Tuesday and Wednesday, 30 people were killed. By yesterday, the death toll in Gaza was at least 44,532 people. Wednesday of last week, the U.S. State Department spokesperson Vedant Patel, he's a deputy spokesperson, urged Israel to investigate the allegations of its airstrikes in Gaza killing aid workers. That was specifically in response to the fact that last Saturday, the World Central Kitchen lost additional staff members. These were local staff members. 3 contractors were killed. Israel said that at least one of them was involved in the October 7th attacks. World Central Kitchen said they had no knowledge to that effect. On Monday, Israeli strikes overnight into Monday killed at least 15 people. Over the weekend, people were crushed to death at a food kitchen seeking bread because they were so hungry. That was reported by the UN agency UNRWA. UNRWA suspended deliveries because they said it's unsafe for them to continue to seek to deliver aid. November 30th, on Saturday, 45 Palestinians were killed across Gaza. 12 people were bombed while waiting for food aid in south of Khan Yunis. Desperation continues in Gaza. The number of journalists in Gaza continues to rise. In the West Bank, Mahmoud Abbas, the president, decreed Rohi Fattouh, Fattouh, the president of the Palestinian National Council, as his temporary successor if the presidency becomes vacant. That's very significant. IDF forces have continued to clash in different cities throughout the West Bank, specifically near and in Jenin in the north. In the West Bank, there was a terrible attack on Israeli settlers. 9 were wounded in a shooting. 46-year-old Summer Hussein opened fire on a bus in the settlement of Ariel. Also, Israeli police arrested an East Jerusalem resident who was said to have aided and abetted that attack. Hundreds of women dressed in white silently blocked traffic in Tel Aviv, calling for a hostage deal. Egyptian President Sisi encouraged and put pressure on Donald Trump to accept that deal between Cairo and, that whole Cairo hostage negotiation deal. Lebanon, ceasefire between Hezbollah and Israel has continued to hold, but just barely. There have been continued attacks and breaches. There have been continued deaths. It's very, very disconcerting. Netanyahu has said that the war is not over. Not only that, the Israelis are saying The war is not only going to just be against Hezbollah, it's going to be against Lebanon, the Lebanese forces. The total killed in Lebanon is 4,047 people since October of last year. The U.S. has announced additional sanctions against those trading in Iranian oil because they're saying it supports Hezbollah, it supports Iranian-backed terror groups. There's a lot of pressure by top officials on Israel and on Hezbollah to adhere to the ceasefire agreement. Israel has struck towns in South Lebanon. 9 people were killed on December 3rd by the Israeli military in South Lebanon. These are breaches of the ceasefire agreement, but the ceasefire has still held. Hezbollah also counterattacked. They fired 2 mortar shells at northern Israel. 1 person was killed in an Israeli airstrike on Lebanon. My understanding is that there have been deaths in Lebanon. I've not seen that there have been deaths in northern Israel since the ceasefire has happened. If people know of that, please let me know. Israel's Air Force said it struck alleged Hezbollah weapons sites. All of these things are violations of the ceasefire. Israeli jets struck infrastructure near the Syrian-Lebanon border. Israel said weapons were being smuggled in. I have other big news about Syria, and then I'm almost done. The Assad regime in Syria is in big trouble. That's some of the biggest news. A group called the Military Operations Command has taken over several cities, most significantly this week, Aleppo. The group is under the lead of a militant group called Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. It's linked to the al-Nusra Front. This group was very active at the beginning of the Syrian war. Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, or Tahrir al-Sham, it's called the Liberation of Levant movement. It's Islamist, Salafi, it's a jihadist organization. It's mostly a localized terrorist group in Syria. That's how they're seen. They split from Al-Qaeda. They're an anti-Assad insurgent group. They took over Aleppo. Last Friday evening, Netanyahu convened a meeting. Israel is very, very concerned about this. On Saturday, Russia has also been intervening. They said that this is a part of an Israeli-U.S. plot to destabilize the region. After taking over Aleppo, the most significant news from today is that they also moved in and took over. As of Thursday morning, they have moved into the city of Hama, which is another major setback for the Assad regime. So the IDF has said that they killed a major Hezbollah liaison that was an officer in the Syrian army, but that's been escalating quite significantly. They're also in Idlib, I-D-L-I-B, Idlib in Syria. The hospitals and health services there are no longer functioning. I'll give more updates about that next week. In Israel, one of the former Ministry of Defense leaders, Boki Ya'alon, said that Israel is committing ethnic cleansing in the north of the Gaza Strip. That's been all over the Israeli news. Also, 2 more Palestinian prisoners died in Israeli prisons this week. There were protests throughout the West Bank about that. Hamas released a video on Saturday with proof of life from a U.S. citizen and hostage, Eden Alexander. He's an American Israeli. And we also learned that Omer Nutra, an American Israeli citizen, he was believed to have been taken into captivity on October 7th, but it was announced this week that he actually died that day. His body is still being held in Gaza. So a lot of news about that this week. Activists also protested at the UN, acknowledging the Hamas sexual assaults on women, calling for the release of the 13 women who are still held hostage in Gaza. Sarah Netanyahu, the wife of the Prime Minister of Israel, met with Donald Trump last Sunday. We also know that, as I mentioned, Trump has said there will be all hell to pay in the Middle East if the hostages are not released by the time he assumes office. Mike Huckabee, I've reported a lot on some of the things he said. I won't go through that now. This is important. President-elect Trump selected Adam Bowler as the new envoy for hostage affairs. He was very involved in the Abraham Accords. In the last presidency, he worked closely with Jared Kushner. And Trump appointed a new Middle East advisor, Massad Boulous, Boulous. Boulous says the Gaza war is practically over. There's nothing left but for the hostages to be released. I just want to say to Mr. Boulous, except for the fact that people in Gaza continue to die every single day, stop attacking. If there's no war left, then why do Palestinians continue to die every day? The Hill also had an article on the 29th about Democrats sounding the alarm on the West Bank under the Trump administration. It summarized the fears of Democrats, but also many others who fear Trump administration policies. Huckabee doesn't even acknowledge that there is such a thing as the West Bank. Chris Van Hollen, the senator from Maryland, had a very strong op-ed in the Washington Post. That's a strong indictment of the Biden administration, calling on the withholding of weapons that are used in the violation of international law. In Israel, Israel using U.S. weapons in violation of international humanitarian law in Gaza. Finally, Covert Action magazine published an article on December 2nd about 75 protesters who blocked weapons shipments to Israel, or at least attempted to do so on November 20th at the Travis Air Force Base in California, which is just north of San Francisco. Group members were a part of 21 plus peace groups. This was on World Children's Day because thousands and thousands of children, the number I've seen is more than 17,000 children, have been killed in the war between Israel and Hamas since October. Travis Air Force Base is one of the main places where weapons flow to Israel from the United States. The goal was to stop what they have called a genocide in Gaza. So that's the update of news from the past week. I apologize again about my voice. May God go before us in the name of Christ.